Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Hey, let's do it. Let's bring her in. And here she is. Here's Lori.
Hello there, friend. How are you, Rick?
I'm fine. How are you?
Doing good. Enjoying a Sunday afternoon swim.
Oh.
Yeah, I got a swimming pool out my back door, and I've been using it today. Boy, it's 97 degrees with a heat index of, oh my God, 112.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, good day for the swimming pool. My hair's still a little wet, but I wanted to jump on and say hello and see how everybody's doing today on your Sunday. Man, we had a great show last night, didn't we? On Strange
It was an interesting conversation.
It was good to have you there. I know it was supposed to be your night off, and then you came to work anyway.
Yeah.
You're the hardest working man in show business. You just never take a break.
I am exhausted, actually, because I didn't get home until very late.
Yeah. It was a late night for me, too. I was up talking to our friend Kevin Michelizzi over in Crimea at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's 10 a.m. their time, but 2 a.m. my time. So, yeah, I'm a little bleary-eyed myself today. But anyway, interesting conversation you guys had earlier. I'm still not sure what the heck communofascism is, but you did a pretty good job of explaining.
Yeah.
It's like a hybrid of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I liked what Tyler said, though. He was like, if Justin Trudeau's a communist, I'm quitting the party.
That's right. Yeah, nobody wants the guy anymore, right?
What an interesting poll that. Very interesting. It's interesting to me that, Pierre still ranks so high in the hearts of Canadians.
He's
but
like, he's Canada's Kennedy.
I think he is. That's a really good comparison. And, I just heard Leo talking about Kyle Kemper. I've always looked at Kyle as Justin's hippie half brother.
Yep.
He's a total hippie. I had a chance to meet Kyle sort of in the Twitter space. We haven't met face to face, but we did a Twitter space together about RFK last week, and a really nice guy. So I was surprised when we had him on Maverick News the other night. I thought he was like a friend of the freedom movement. And wow, I was kind of shocked to see people in the chat room who really hate him. And I heard Leo saying just now, I was curious as to why. And I wondered if it was just because he's Trudeau's half brother, just being related to Trudeau was like a bad thing, or if it was because he's endorsing Kennedy, that they think he's gone woke liberal or something.
If you rewind a year ago, we had Kyle on the show, and the response was very positive.
I remember that.
Yeah, and now I brought him on. I was also surprised to see the negative comments. Yeah.
Well, I hope we didn't hurt his feelings. I hope he'll come back.
I'm sure he will.
I think he's a really nice guy.
Yeah,
I chatted with him for probably 5 hours, man. It was a long Twitter space, and we were the only two in the room on Team Kennedy defending Kennedy. So we were kind of teamed up for that match, working together,
Well, it's nice to have at least one friend.
Exactly. That's the only friend I had on that panel.
Yeah.
But Kyle, I know it's weird that he's a Canadian and yet he's going to all this trouble for Kennedy. He's got the Kennedy bus and he's been driving it all across America. You know,
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that weird, but
You don't?
no, not really.
Huh.
Canadians are so Americanized, especially down here where I live, because we're not far from the border, right?
Sure.
Uh, we're bombarded with American culture, television, movies, everything. We're very Americanized. We're definitely not American, and there are differences as you go across the country culturally and socially. But what happens in the States has a huge impact on what happens here.
That's right.
We're so connected, right? So, of course, we have a vested interest in what goes on in the US. Of course, we're interested in US politics. A lot of people, you can see it in the chat, will sit here and say, why are you covering American politics? Get that, what? Just focus on Canada. Well, no, it's extremely important that we stay in tune with what's going on down there. And well, I don't think that it's appropriate to have foreign meddling in your elections.
Exactly.
I think that we certainly deserve to have a voice like any other country in the world, and maybe even more so because we are so closely linked. And so I don't
That's
think it's
right.
strange at all to see what Kyle Kemper is doing.
That's good to hear you say that. I agree. I think that, I mean, obviously there are limits on how involved Canadians could get involved with the U.S. elections. I mean, there are laws about that. You can't donate. Unfortunately, you can't buy merchandise. I've had a lot of Canadian Kennedy supporters ask me if they could buy a Kennedy t-shirt or a ball cap or something off the website. And it's like, no, you can't buy it directly from the website because of those laws. But, Kyle, it's legal for him to volunteer to do this of his own accord, put his own money into it and do it just because he wants to. I mean, that's freedom, right? That's what we're all about here at Maverick News. I wanted to tell you, there's a new poll out, a new Harvard-Harris poll. Bobby tweeted it out today, and it honestly kind of even took me back. I was amazed to see that he's leading the pack right now in this. And this is a major poll. This is a Harvard-Harris poll. It's a favorability poll, like how people look at him. He's got 49% favorability in front of Trump. They're kind of neck and neck, which is what makes the poll very interesting. Biden was way down there at 20 some odd percent.
Which is probably inflated.
Yeah, exactly. I've never seen a president in my lifetime with so much artificially inflated popularity. They've been telling us that Joe Biden's a winner and the best president ever since 2020, and the people just don't seem to think so. So I question some of these polls, and yet I like this poll because my guy's ahead, and he's leading Trump by 3 points. Trump's at 45%. Kennedy's at 49%. So I thought that was interesting. But I wanted to hop on here today because I wanted to address one of my pet peeves in this campaign, besides the censorship, besides the slanders and the defamations that they keep throwing at Kennedy. You know what pisses me off more than anything, Rick?
I don't.
When people call him JFK Jr. And a lot of people do that.
Oh, yeah.
I even heard members of Congress the other day at the hearing accidentally slip and call him JFK Jr. And unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion, it seems, about, I know there's a lot of Kennedys and it's hard to keep them all straight. And then it gets more convoluted and crazy when you look at this whole QAnon thing where they think JFK Jr. is still alive. And have you heard the latest JFK Jr. QAnon conspiracy theory? It's a good one.
Another one? Like what? Lay it on me.
There's a new one. Okay, bear with me. I'm going to try and explain this. They think that JFK Jr. didn't die in a plane crash, right? He faked his death. Okay. I guess his wife and sister-in-law somehow did that too. So they all faked their deaths, and they've been in the witness protection program all these years. And, the big Q conspiracy theory a couple of years ago was that JFK Jr. was going to come out of the witness protection program and declare his solidarity with Donald Trump, and he was going to run as Trump's running mate. Okay. So now the new theory, and this is wild, they're saying that RFK Jr. isn't RFK Jr. He's actually the not dead JFK Jr., who's like wearing a mask or something. And he's trying to look like his cousin Bobby, and he took his cousin Bobby's name. And so then the plan, the plan is that RFK Jr. is going to team up with Trump. And then the QAnon prophecy is fulfilled. They'll run together.
Lori, what's wrong with that?
I just wonder what happened to RFK Jr. if that's the case. I mean, where's he hiding? Is he in the witness protection program?
I don't know. You just asked too many questions.
I know.
You just got to go.
Just got to go with it sometimes, right? Just go with it. What the hell? If you want to call him JFK Jr., that's fine.
As long as they vote for him, what do you care?
That's right. I don't care. Just click the name Kennedy. That's good enough for me. Doesn't matter which Kennedy it is. I don't know if you saw the video, but boy, has it gone viral. Bobby's siblings have been turning against him, and they've been putting out statements this past week because of the kerfuffle over his comments about COVID perhaps being ethnically targeted to spare some and be harder on others. Yeah. So his sister, Carrie Kennedy, put out a statement basically saying, I denounce my own brother. And then President Kennedy's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, Caroline Kennedy's son, he put out a video on Instagram yesterday, just attacking Bobby. And I've been a Kennedy follower for many, many decades now. The Kennedys were always a united front, at least publicly, right? They might disagree in private, but publicly they always stood together. You might remember the William Kennedy Smith trial back in 1990, that rape trial. All the Kennedys stood together, although not all of them thought he was innocent. But publicly they stood behind him. Same with the Michael Skakel trial and other scandals that have erupted over the years. The Kennedys always stuck together. It's very strange to see them having this very public, ugly thing. I don't think anybody wants to see any family's business aired like that in public.
Yeah.
I find it unseemly, don't you? Have you seen the video?
No, I haven't seen the video, no.
It's pretty sad. It was just a brief little video where he hops on, basically says Bobby's crazy. Don't listen to Bobby Kennedy, and endorses Biden, and proceeds to say, I mean, he's really reaching here, proceeds to say that Biden's the best president ever in American history, he said.
Oh yeah. Well, that's self-evident. Just,
wow.
He's so good he doesn't even need to be awake when he's it's like he's so good he can sleepwalk through the entire presidency.
That's right. That's right. Well, we've talked about this before on the show about the JFK Jr. crazy QAnon conspiracy thing.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason I wanted to come on and talk to you about it today is today marks the 24th anniversary of John F. Kennedy Jr.'s funeral. And I know that there are some people in our audience who don't believe he's really dead, but we can just talk over this video. I'm going to play you footage of his memorial mass.
Welcome to this special edition of Worldview. I'm Frank Sesno in Washington. Bernard Shaw and Judy Woodruff are on assignment. An Irish memorial mass for John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn, and her sister Lauren Bissett is scheduled to begin any moment now at Old St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. This service comes hours after the remains of all three were buried at sea in a ceremony off Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts.
From ABC News, around the world and into your home, the stories that touch your life. This is 2020.
From ABC News in New York, Barbara Walters.
Good evening and welcome to 2020 Friday. Hugh is on vacation. As most of you know, a private memorial service was held this morning for John F. Kennedy Jr. and his wife Carolyn at a small church here in New York City. The service was attended by President and Mrs. Clinton and their daughter Chelsea, by friends and family, 25 Kennedy cousins, uncles and aunts, and those who are most immediately affected by the tragedy. They came, young and old, and from 3 generations of Kennedys and their friends, to pray this morning at the Church of St. Thomas More. This was John Kennedy Jr.'s parish church in his youth, a fitting choice his family felt to mourn his death and that of his wife, and to celebrate their lives. Carolyn Bessette Kennedy's parents, who had lost not just 1, but 2 children, slipped into the service away from the cameras. The service was planned principally by Senator Ted Kennedy, the family patriarch, and by Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg, John Kennedy's beloved sister. It was Caroline, we understand, who insisted on complete privacy for this morning's Mass. The guests, about 300 of them, were admitted strictly by invitation. But New Yorkers are an inventive breed.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling.
Last night in Lower Manhattan, there was a public memorial Mass. It was sponsored by the Irish community, and Rodney Cook spoke on behalf of John Kennedy Jr.'s friends.
John would not want us to be saddened over his leaving us, but rather he would want to compel each of you to be the hope for our generation and nation that he was for us.
The notion of generation, of one setting an example for another, is central to the Kennedy family. John Kennedy Jr. was too young to really know his father. He had to learn about him from family friends.
Is outside the cathedral in New York. He joins us now. Gary?
Well, Frank, there's been an overwhelming response for invitations to this memorial mass, the public memorial mass at the old St. Patrick Cathedral.
Quite a crowd on hand. It's very hot and uncomfortable, we understand, inside, but nonetheless, many people, many hundreds of people apparently turning out saying they simply have to be there one last time. They need to be on hand. You're starting to see some of the bagpipes and flags moving inside. Let's just listen for a bit here.
By your power, Christ conquered death and returned to you in glory. May all your people who have gone before you in faith share his victory and enjoy the vision of your glory forever, where Christ lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever.
We pray for our president, for all our representatives in city, state, and federal government. May the example of dedicated and unselfish public service of so many members of the Kennedy family be their model and inspiration. We pray to the Lord.
Lord, hear our prayer.
I spent time with John on Cumberland Island, Georgia, and he and Carolyn would stay with Emily and me at our home in Atlanta. John gave his time working on many organizations which helped people, but Cumberland to him was special. Our project there would have both fostered the arts and encouraged sensitivity to its wilderness. He so loved that island that he chose to marry Carolyn there. He told me his happiest days were there. Our generation's most shining light has been extinguished too soon, and we all feel it very deeply. John would not want us to be saddened over his leaving us, but rather he would want to compel each of you to be the hope for our generation and nation that he was for us. If all of you here will try as hard as you can to be that hope in whatever way for you is best, his memory and promise for the United States will live through us and never be extinguished from our hearts. We pray for the Kennedy family that they may find strength in their faith, love, and friends, and once again cope with the tragic loss that they have so courageously done in the past. We pray to the Lord.
Earlier this week, Bob Brown talked with a renowned historian who tried to explain the repeated tragedies that seem to surround the Kennedys, and we were struck by some of his insights about the lives and the legacy of this family.
As they gathered outside today's memorial service, and even from a distance over the sea yesterday, Americans knew without even seeing the faces, the posture, the grief of a family that had gathered in sorrow so often before. The young man whose ashes were committed to the ocean had not died in war or in public service, as his uncles and father had. But the services for him and his wife clearly echoed a recognition of the sacrifices the family had made and the presumed value of what had been lost.
It's terrible to see a young life cut off, as this has been. Awful. It's like a novel that's never finished, or a play that they stop the performance in the second act. We want to know what happens. We want to know what became of this, what is to become of this handsome, gifted young man, and we'll never know.
David McCullough is an historian who has written often about politics and whose biography of Harry Truman won a Pulitzer Prize. He is a resident of Martha's Vineyard and a friend of the Kennedys. I spoke with him by phone from New York about the litany of family tragedies that has become so unsettling and familiar to Americans.
Well, I think anyone who selects a political life is taking risks. One can die figuratively or literally in that way of life, but they believed in it. A hero is someone who takes a risk. The old definition of a hero is somebody who puts his life at risk and who is also, in the old Greek sense, favored by the gods. And at times they seem to be favored by the gods. And that was an immense part of their charm and their attractiveness. We tend to see people of immense wealth as people who are somehow removed from the dangers, the risks, the pitfalls of life. And of course that's fantasy. They seem to be the family that has everything. Well, they don't have everything, and one of the things they don't have is control over their own destinies, any more than anybody else does.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
And in a family known by the actions it took and not by the risks it avoided. John Kennedy Jr., when asked by Barbara Walters to describe his greatest fear, gave an answer that seemed appropriate to the character of the family.
I think that my greatest fear would be to be faint of heart.
In his eulogy today, Senator Edward Kennedy recalled the famous image of John Jr. running to his father's helicopter and how the president remarked, "Every mother in the United States is saying, isn't it wonderful to see that love between a son and his father? Little do they know," he added, that son would have raced right by his father to get to the helicopter.
Now, I know there are people who think that's not really him and that's not really his body. I don't know, but I wasn't there. I can tell you, and I guess the reason I wanted to talk about it today was I miss John. I actually knew John Kennedy Jr. He was a friend of mine. I can't say a really, really close friend, but we met on several occasions. And he was a wonderful person. I was absolutely devastated when he died. And it hurts my heart when I hear people try to spread this nonsense that he's still alive. He's gone, folks. He's been gone for 24 years. And I know there are people out there who might say, "Oh, Lori, you don't know. You just don't know. You haven't read the Q drops." And I'm like, yeah, I have. I've read them all. And it's disturbing when someone talks that way about a friend of yours, someone that you love, someone that you miss, someone that you knew, and they tell you that person's not dead, and they try to give you some kind of false hope that they might come back to life or something. It's very painful. And I'm personally tired of hearing it. You know, I want to talk to people today as someone who knew John. And people ask me, what was he like? And so I've never actually told publicly my story. And I thought I would share it with you today because it's a really cool, really fun story of how I met John F. Kennedy Jr. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
This is a great story. As you know, Rick, I used to, in another life, I was a musician, spent most of my life in a band, traveling all over the United States. And in 1991, was playing a blues festival. We were a blues band. And it's a big festival, happens every year in the Mississippi Delta. It's called the King Biscuit Blues Festival. And I was there on the bill. And also, lots of other great acts on the bill. So we're on stage and we're playing our set. And I'm looking off to the side. The backstage area is kind of off to the side of the stage. And that's usually where people, other musicians will hang out and watch other bands play. And I look over and there's this tall, good-looking white guy, wearing a T-shirt and shorts and a ball cap, kind of incognito. He had shades on. And he's just grooving. He's in the groove. He's having a good time. He was enjoying our music. So I was kind of looking at him over there. Can't lie, he was a good-looking fella. So I was looking at him, and after our set, he comes over to us, came over to me. And he just wanted to talk about music. He was a big fan of the blues. When people asked me what was he like, I said, John had excellent taste in music. He was also the biggest Rolling Stones fan I've ever met. And I'm a pretty big Rolling Stones fan myself. So we were talking about music. And I kept, I couldn't see his face because of the shades and his hair was covered with the ball cap. I wasn't really sure who I was talking to. I just thought he was a nice guy. So we stood there and talked for 5 or 10 minutes. And I kept trying to place him. I was like, finally, I said, you look familiar. Where have we met before? And I said, what's your name? He said, I'm John. I went, John. Then it hit me. I was like, hold on, take off your shades. Who are you? Are you John Kennedy? He's like, yeah, but keep it on the down low. I'm on a vacation here. I don't want paparazzi following me. I had to sneak out of New York City because I just wanted to come to a blues festival. I'm taking the weekend off in Mississippi, man. I'm here just to have some fun. So not too many people know I'm here. He had a girlfriend with him. I won't say who. I won't say her name. But yeah, they were just traveling for the weekend. So he wanted us to keep it on the down low. And of course we did. And one of the coolest things about him was his curiosity. Bobby has that same curiosity. It's kind of a trait that runs in the Kennedy family. His dad was like that. So he wanted to know about the Delta Blues. He's a big fan. He said, is there like a tour I can take while I'm here for the weekend? I want to absorb the feeling of the Mississippi Delta that inspired all this music, the music of Muddy Waters, the music of Robert Johnson and Albert King and B.B. King. And everybody was from the Mississippi Delta, all the blues greats. And I said, well, I know my way around because I was a frequent traveler through the Delta. I'm a historian. I know where all the historic sites are. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to do some sightseeing. So I said, yeah, I'll show you around if you got time tomorrow, if you want to go. He said, yeah, I'd love to. And I said, where are you staying? He says, well, I don't have a hotel room yet. This was kind of a spur of the moment trip. I didn't book a hotel. And there aren't many hotels down there. It's a very rural part of the Delta. So I said, well, I know a place. He goes, I said, why don't you stay at the Peabody in Memphis? All the nice hotels, the 4- and 5-star hotels are in Memphis. There aren't any 5-star hotels in the Mississippi Delta. He said, no, I don't want to stay in one of those. He said, I want to stay in a place that's down home and funky. Yeah, I want to feel the Delta. And I said, well, I know just the place. I said, you need to stay at the Riverside Motel in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which is just across the river from Helena. And I've stayed there several times. It is down home. It is funky. No TVs, no telephones, no internet, none of that. This is 1991. There wasn't even internet then. And just so you know, I'm not making this story up. I'm going to show you a picture. This is John at the Riverside Hotel in Clarksdale. Can y'all see that?
Yeah, let me bring it up.
That is John F. Kennedy Jr. on the right. And the proprietress of that motel. I've been going there for years. Of course, she is now passed away. She was Mrs. Hill. She was the owner. And she was a sweet, sweet lady. I knew the folks who ran the place. But there's a wonderful story about his stay there. And, Mrs. Hill said to John, she said, your father made a big difference around here for a lot of people. And John was visibly moved when she took him over to the wall and showed him a picture that they had hanging up of his father, President John F. Kennedy. They also had a picture of Senator Robert Kennedy because, he made a pretty well-publicized trip to the Mississippi Delta shortly before he died. He went down there it was on his poverty tour, because the poverty in the Delta is just terrible, even to this day.
Yeah.
And so, John, he wanted to feel it, man. He wanted to experience it. I thought that was so cool. And so he stayed in one room. We were a couple doors down the hall. And in fact, I will show you. I'll show you the hotel. There's a video, and I have a tour given by the guy who ran it. Mrs. Hill's husband was a guy named Rat. We called him Rat. Great, great, great guy. And, he will give you a little tour of the place. Uh-oh. My video just crashed. Hang on a second. I'll have to cue this up. But the next day, he wanted to go on a tour of the Delta. So we took him on a tour. Took him all over the place. Took him to Clarksdale. Took him to Robinsonville. Took him to Tunica. All of these historic sites where the music was born, where the music was made. And I don't know if any of you guys are blues fans out here in the audience, but if you are, this will be a real treat for you. I'm going to give you a little look inside the Riverside Hotel in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and we will show you the room where John F. Kennedy Jr. stayed, which has been kept just this way all these years. And they even have some of his possessions that he left behind that they keep in the room as if he's, I don't know, maybe going to come back someday and retrieve his shampoo. This is Rat.
Now, this hall here is the original building when it was a hospital. All the blues singers, this is where they came in and entered into the main building. This wall here wasn't here when it was a hospital.
Oh, I should tell you, there's actually an interesting history behind this. This building, when you look, it looks like an old hospital, doesn't it? It was.
Yeah.
Back in the 1930s. This place has a fascinating history. In the 30s, it was a hospital for blacks only. And you guys have probably heard of the legendary blues singer Bessie Smith. She died. She was involved in a terrible car accident outside of Clarksdale, Mississippi. This was like 1937. And because she was black, the nearest hospital was for whites only. And they would not let her into the emergency room. And they said, you got to go to the black folks hospital, right? And this was the black folks hospital. So unfortunately, the time that elapsed trying to get her to the blacks only hospital, she died before they could save her life. So that's the story behind this place. It became a motel in the 40s. And in the 40s, a lot of famous people stayed there. Sonny Boy Williamson lived there. Robert Nighthawk, John Lee Hooker, Ike Turner, Tina Turner's husband. Well, I'll let Rat continue the story.
All these doors was original to the hospital. On down here, as you pass this to the hall, this room here was the scrub room and the recovery room.
That's where Bessie Smith
This room
died.
here was the emergency room. This was the best. This is the Bessie Smith room here. This is the room that Bessie died in when it was a hospital. This was the emergency room here. That portrait there on the bed was one of the guests painted that. This photo here on the wall, that's a photo of my mother right here.
Okay.
Picture there.
It's been owned by the same family all these years. Still is. Isn't that
Room
cool?
2. That's the best. Room 2A is the JFK room. We call this the Kennedy room. John Jr. stayed here in 91. Come on.
There it is.
This is the original.
That's the room.
You can hear everything. Some of the things in here as I can show you around here. We call this drawer here is the hobo's drawer. That's his personal stuff in the drawer. This here is Bunny's drawer. She played keyboard. That's her personal stuff in the drawer. This drawer here is Gypsy's drawer from Japan. That's his personal stuff.
Will they ever come back?
And whenever they come back, the stuff is already in the drawers. They never have to worry about it. It stays here. People leave things. Every drawer in this building that's somebody's personal belongings, and no one never bothered, never take anything and leaves it right there. They leave stuff here. I got to see every room, like your room, had stuff in the drawer. Okay. Now this was the men's ward when it was the hospital. This from here to the front, the stairs went down and come underneath. Underneath here, the Rocket 88, the demo was written, rehearsed, and practiced in this building. John Lee Hooker, Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy all stayed in here. In these rooms. This was added in 1944. This was when we start the hotel. Every door you see is identical on the bottom floor. It's 2 floors. It's a 2-level building.
Okay.
Come on down. And here, these are the baths.
You wouldn't believe those
One
pictures
bath
on the
here.
walls. There's so much cool
Men's.
stuff on the walls.
As we call it, the men's bath. This here is the co-op, ladies out men's. Now, some of these rooms is taken, like room 5. It's taken. That's Muddy Waters, Sunny Boy. The original furniture is still in that room. Now, this room here is one of the guest rooms here. Come on in. This has twin beds in here.
It's all original furniture.
And some of the rooms have their furniture in here. Some of the rooms have furniture that's over 100 years old.
Wow.
Your room was my grandmother's furniture, and it's over 100 years old.
Wow, it was really good.
Well, all the 6 John Lee Hooker's room. That room is occupied.
I've stayed there. I've stayed in the John Lee Hooker suite.
Room 7 was a full-size bed. The blind boys from Alabama stayed in this room 7. Sam Cooke stayed in room 7. But during that time, those beds there was my brother's and my bed, twin beds. They've just been reupholstered. I do all the work, the flows, and all the upholstery. All the paint is done by me.
I miss Rat. He was a sweetheart.
Down here, room 8, blind boy from Alabama. This room here was occupied by Nate Thanger for 30 years. Fellow lived in here weekly for 30 years. This is his picture here. And everybody knew him by Nate.
I remember
When I wasn't here, he ran the place. Room 9, Ike Turner.
That's, yeah.
And all the guests stayed in here.
That's the room I stayed in down the hall from
Here,
Kennedy that trip. The Ike Turner room. It's my favorite room at the Riverside. It's the best. Love that old bed.
You go in room 8, check a picture of that. That furniture is old.
No frills, but a lot of charm.
Dresser, chest of drawer. It's all the original.
No TV set. No telephone. No refrigerator. Yeah. But you got a copy of Blues Festival Guide 2008 in your room. Isn't that cool? Yeah. Isn't it? Yeah, it's a really, really neat place. And you know, John loved it. I was like hesitant to recommend this place because it's a dump. Okay. For a guy like him, you know, multimillionaire, I was like, are you sure you really want to stay here? So I told him where the place was, and we drove him back over to Clarksdale because we were staying there too. And I walked into the desk, and I knew Rat and Mrs. Hill, and I said, I know you're probably full for the festival because it's a really small place. They haven't got many rooms, but I said, I got a really, really special guest out there in the car. He didn't even have wheels. He didn't rent a car. So he was like bumming a ride from us. we were driving John F. Kennedy Jr. around. It was crazy, just crazy. One of those things you think would never happen in your whole life, but this actually happened. So she says, who? And I said, it's John F. Kennedy Jr., but you're not supposed to say anything. Shh, because, you know, the paparazzi follows him everywhere. She's like, no problem. She says, as a matter of fact, I will give him my room, her room, because it was the only room left. You know, this festival brings people from all over the country, and they book that place up a year in advance. And so she said, give me 15 minutes. Let me go clean my room. And John can stay in my room. So he stayed in her room. And ever since, it's been called the John F. Kennedy Jr. Suite. And, you know, the press was calling the place. The press, the tabloids got a tip that he was in Mississippi, and they kept calling the hotel all weekend long saying, is John F. Kennedy Jr. staying there? We're following up on a rumor. And she's like, who? What? No, I don't know what you're talking about. Click. Hang up on him. It was great. So how much fun would it be for John just to get away from Manhattan, get away from all of the paparazzi for the weekend, go to a place like Helena, Arkansas, or Clarksdale, Mississippi, and just hang out with real people. And we're real people, and he hung out with us all weekend long, and we had a wonderful time. We took him out to eat some good catfish, good old Mississippi catfish. It was an amazing, amazing journey. And, you know, when it was over, he was like, how can I keep in touch with you guys? Because we didn't have cell phones back then. And so we exchanged phone numbers for our landlines. And he said, you know, back then, bands had mailing lists because we didn't have email, right? So we would have people sign up on a little piece of paper at our gigs, and we'd put them in a real primitive computer database and print out mailing labels and send postcards when we were on tour, right? So our friends in different cities could come see us play. So he got on our mailing list, right? And he said, be sure to put me on your mailing list. That was the last thing he said to me before we parted ways on that trip. He said, I'll come see you. If I'm in town, you know, I travel a lot wherever you are. I'll come out and see you. And I thought, oh, yeah, sure you will. Sure you will. Well, we played New York City a lot in those years. We were constantly touring through, played at a place called Manny's Car Wash. And also we played a place called the Lone Star Cafe on 52nd Street. So anyway, I would always, you know, send him the postcard if we were coming to town. Didn't know if he'd show up or not. You know what? He showed up. He showed up. I thought he was just bullshitting when he said he liked our music. I thought he was just being nice, but no, he really liked our music. So he would show up at our gigs, and he would come and dance with his girlfriend of the moment. You know, he would always show up with a beautiful woman on his arm. And do you know what a cool feeling it is, Rick, to be up on stage playing your music and you look down on the dance floor and there's John F. Kennedy Jr. dancing to your music, man. How cool was that? And then he would hang out with us on breaks. And I'll tell you a little secret about John. He liked to smoke pot. John was a pothead. So, in between sets, we'd go out back and the band would be standing around, out in the alley, passing the joint. John definitely inhaled. He definitely inhaled. Matter of fact, he was bumming weed off of us all weekend because he couldn't fly. I should probably point out that he was flying his own plane that weekend because he had a plane and he was pilot. So he flew himself down there and flew back. He didn't fly that. He didn't make that trip on a commercial flight. So sadly, that's how he died. John loved the escape of being a pilot. We talked a lot about aviation. I'm kind of an aviation nut. We talked mostly about music and aviation. Rarely did we talk politics. We didn't talk about his dad. I wanted to ask, I'm a big JFK historian, but I didn't feel like that was the right time or place. We usually met in a party atmosphere. I didn't want to bring him down by talking about his father, so I didn't. But that was his escape. The poor guy lived in a fishbowl his whole life. He was literally born as his father was coming into the White House. He doesn't have any memories of his dad. None. All he knows is what people tell him, what he sees in the movies and reads in the papers. And he was chased and pursued by fans and the media all of his life. And the only place that he could escape all that and be free was in his plane. That's why he lived. Besides, he just loved to fly. He loved aviation. He loved anything that flew from the time he was a little kid. He was fascinated with Marine One and Air Force One when his father was president. And there are some cute little pictures of baby John sitting in the cockpit of Marine One, like he's fixing to take off with these big old headphones on him. It's so cute. But I'll tell you another fun story about my time with John Kennedy. When our band played Telluride, Colorado in the 90s, this would be the early 90s, he was dating Daryl Hannah, the actress. Remember when they used to be an item?
Splash.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They were together for several years. And Daryl Hannah owns a beautiful home outside of Telluride up in the Colorado mountains. And I mean, it's nice. It's like 14,000 feet altitude. It's up there by Coors Mountain. She has a view of Coors Mountain. So we were playing this club in Telluride. And if you've ever been to Telluride, it's a really small town. It looks like an old Wild West kind of place. There aren't any hotels to speak of. So we needed a place to stay. And John called me up when he saw on our calendar. He got the card in the mail saying, "Hey, I see you're going to be in Telluride on such and such a date. My girlfriend Daryl lives there. You're probably going to need a place to stay. You guys want to stay at Daryl's house?" Because Daryl was up there in New York with him. Her house was just sitting there empty. I'm like, really? Can we do that? He goes, "Let me ask Daryl. Hold on a second." Right? He's like, "Hey, Daryl, can this band stay at your place?" We never actually met her because John always had a different woman with him, but that's another story. And so Daryl very kindly put us up at her house. So we're staying in Daryl Hannah's house, and everywhere in this house, every wall, every bedside corner table was a picture of John. They had pictures of them together as a couple, but it was sweet. You could tell she really loved him. And she was so proud to have John F. Kennedy Jr. as her boyfriend. Boy, there was pictures all over that house. All over that house. So you can imagine my sadness on 24 years ago this week when I woke up in the morning and I heard that John's plane was missing. It couldn't be. It just didn't seem real. And like I said, I can't claim to have been one of his best friends. Or didn't know him intimately, but I did spend enough time with him to get a feel for what kind of person he was. John was a good man. You know, all politics aside, all political hopes and aspirations that we might have had for John aside, I'm just talking about the human being that I had the chance to spend time with. I was blessed through a stroke of luck or fate or whatever it was. And I made a friend when I lost him 24 years ago this month. I have to tell you that it's a wound that never healed for me and for a lot of us. Anybody who knew him, anybody who ever met him, everybody loved him. I never met anybody who had a bad word to say about John Kennedy Jr. That's pretty rare. He was that kind of guy that everybody just loved. And I know it's hard to accept that he's gone. Believe me, I understand. But it doesn't do us any good to think that he's still alive and he's going to come back and save the world. He's not. He's gone. He's been gone a long time. And his funeral was 24 years ago today. It's a date I always remember on my calendar every year. Still miss him. And you know, Rick, all those hopes that our generation had that John might run for president someday, that's not going to happen. But we got Bobby Kennedy Jr. And you know, Bobby was John's closest cousin. Of all the Kennedy cousins and the RFKs and the JFKs, they didn't hang out. Jackie Kennedy didn't like her kids hanging out with the RFK kids because they were kind of wild. But, you know, Bobby and John, they had that special connection. Maybe because they were both the namesake sons of the two Kennedy icons. But I think as people, they were on the same wavelength. I've met Bobby too and spent enough time with Bobby to say, yes, there are similarities between these two. And they were very, very close friends. I know that wound hasn't healed for Bobby either. So not only his presidential run, it's not only about picking up the torch that his father left behind or that President Kennedy left behind. But I think in some way he's also doing it for his cousin John. Because everybody wanted John to run. Everybody wanted John to be president someday. It seemed like his birthright, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think Bobby's picking up that mantle for him too. And I just kind of wanted to remember him today. So
well, I'm grateful for you sharing that story. That's I think it's probably a little bit difficult for you to share.
First time. I mean, I've told it privately to my friends, of course, but I've never told the story publicly before. And I probably wouldn't have. I've always, you know, kind of respected that was a private friendship. I never wanted to cash in on my friendship with John. Never wanted to exploit him in any way. The only reason I'm bringing it up now is because there's so much confusion on the campaign trail about RFK Jr. being called JFK Jr. And then you throw in all the crazy QAnon stuff and people are just confused. Yeah. So I wanted to clear that up and be very clear that RFK Jr. is really RFK Jr. and that he really misses his cousin John like we all do.
Yeah.
And that John is definitely gone. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was emotional.
Doesn't seem like it was that long ago to me, but
no kidding, man. It's going to be 25 years next summer.
Wow. During
the election, you know, there's going to be that 25th anniversary, which I'm sure the media will celebrate. And who knows? Yeah. If Bobby wins the primaries, he's going to be the Democratic nominee for president of the United States when that happens next summer.
Yeah.
I wonder what John would think. I've been asking myself that question a lot lately. Like, if John was here, what would he think of Bobby running for president? Would he be campaigning for him? Would he be supporting him because they were so close? Would he be aligned with him on the issues? Or would he be over here with the rest of the Kennedy Democrats denouncing him and saying, oh, that's my cousin, he's crazy? I wonder
sometimes too, where he would take us if he were here today.
Oh boy.
Because I used to think that he would make a great president, but
absolutely. Me too. And meeting him only confirmed that for me. I knew he'd be a great president. And yet, I didn't really want him to seek that job on some level. I wanted John to enjoy his life. I felt like he'd earned that. After all the things he'd been through, if he didn't want to run for anything, that would have been fine with me. I never put any pressure on him about it because so many people did. I mean, every interview he did, he was always asked. Every single interview, are you going to run for president? You know how tired he got of answering that question? Yeah. And yet he was always gracious and kind about it and dodged it the best he could. Always non-committal. And, there's another conspiracy theory while we're at it that I'd like to knock down because it's just not true. You often see on the internet people saying, John was the front runner in the New York Senate race when he died. He wasn't. He wasn't running for anything. He'd never run for an office, never declared, never filed. He was not running for anything at the time of his death. Now, that New York Senate seat was open because Daniel Patrick Moynihan was resigning. Hillary Clinton, who was then First Lady, she made it known that she was interested in that Senate seat in 1999. And that summer, privately, John confided to some friends that he was interested in maybe running for that Senate seat. They didn't really know how serious he was, but his friends say he sounded pretty serious, like he was finally considering some sort of political run. He had his eye on that seat until Hillary Clinton announced that she was going to run for it. And people say on the internet that he was running against Hillary for the Senate seat. That's just not true. In fact, he and Hillary and Bill were very good friends. And he was not about to challenge Hillary for that Senate seat. They made an agreement. As politics, you know how politics goes. If your friend is running for a certain office, you're not going to challenge them.
Yep.
So he wasn't going to challenge Hillary. And he wasn't running for anything, just to be clear. And whether he would have run for president or not, who knows? I think he was very happy just doing George Magazine. That's really what he wanted to do with his life. At least for, several years more. I could see him maybe in his 50s or 60s getting into politics, but I don't think he was in a hurry. People were always trying to hurry him towards that goal from the time he was a teenager.
Yeah.
Like they were grooming him for the presidency. It seemed unfair. Just let the poor kid grow up. Let him have a life. And please let him rest in peace now that he's gone.
Well, Lori, that gets us to 9:13. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that story with us tonight.
Thanks for letting me.
Yeah. Thanks. And with that, folks, we are going to wrap up. I have to get up very early in the morning. I've got a trip to make, but I'll be back tomorrow night. Once again, Lori, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, folks, we'll see you tomorrow night on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.